Assalamu alaikum. Welcome to the class. How is everyone? Are you all doing fine? Can you hear me?
Hello, sir. Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Are you all doing fine?
No, sir.
Why? Is it because the end of the semester?
Not because of that, sir. Due to illness, sir.
Okay, that's too bad. Um, a lot of us are going through some tough weather, so just hold on to it, inshallah. Soon it will go away. And also, according to uh, uh, um, basically the illness is a form of reward, inshallah. So if we hold on to it, or we don't really complain that much. Anyways, we are almost at the end of our course, so I think we're going to have three classes including this one. And I'm really excited for this because in these last three classes we're going to be learning something really cool, and we're going to be learning some advanced stuff, inshallah. So, but before I do that, before I talk about that, I have posted the homework two in the ELMS, and since you have worked really hard on homework one, I actually made the second one easy. So the second homework is basically on some comparison. So in our class, we have been studying um, the Django web framework, but there are other frameworks out there. So I really want you to know about them as well. We have some plan to discuss about some other frameworks in the class, hope if we get the time. But the report is basically, or the homework is basically about that. So you will have to compare Django with, I think, two other frameworks that I have mentioned in the homework, and you would have to write a table, and in the table you will have to mention the frameworks. uh, I think I have given you Django and probably Laravel, and the other one is Next.js. So they are different types of frameworks. So you will take a look into their documentation, and then you will try to compare them
স্যার
based on what you have learned. Yes.
স্যার এখানে লেখা nuxt.js ওটা কি next হবে না?
So I have given Next.js to the one to section A, and there's another framework called Next.js. So it's a different type of framework. So it sounds similar, but they are two different frameworks. Okay. So you can go and see the documentation, and you will be able to find some traits about each of these frameworks, and you will just create a comparison report based on what you find. And in the table, you will have to mention the points I have listed in the home assignment. For example, you will have to compare it against the popularity, the community, and everything. For example, in terms of the community, you will have to find out who actually uses these types of framework. For example, Django is a full stack web framework, so it is used by full stack developers. And you can also mention some of the popular websites that are built using Django. For example, if I'm not mistaken, Instagram was made using Django. So you can mention these things in the community as well. And you will have to mention different numerical values to get good marks. And you can also put the references at the bottom. So you can take help from the internet, and you can find out different statistics. For example, how many people uses Django and how many people uses Next.js, and so. And you will list down the reference, which means where you found those data at the end of the homework. So it's kind of like a research paper where at the end you have the reference, and in the reference you will mention the websites.
Sir,
And also, yes,
by numeric values, did you mean the statistics?
yes, the statistics. We will just because I have given reports like this, and people have written that okay, one framework is very popular, another one is low on popular, and so I didn't really trust you, right? So I will trust you when I see the data. So you will have to provide some numerical data. So that's why I mentioned that thing.
স্যার
Yes,
ডেটা বলতে স্যার স্পেসিফিকলি স্যার মানে
count
হিস্ট্রি
counts and numbers. So you will not say that okay, it's very popular. You will have to show some numbers. For example, like 1 million people uses it, and every day we are getting like thousands of new developers, and so you will have to give the numbers, and the numbers will come from obviously the websites, and you will mention the website in the reference, right?
Sir, in
Yes.
the report there is mention that customizability. What can you explain about it a little bit?
Yeah. So basically, what you can do is there are web frameworks that are not really very customizable. They are not very flexible. They are very rigid. So you don't really have an option to add different plugins, or you don't have the option to develop your own plugin. So you will have to use only their built-in features. So that means the customizability is not really there. And in terms of Django, we have a lot of customizability option, although it provides a lot of better insight. For example, we're going to be seeing today that we can do the authentication part using those components. But some frameworks do not have that option. They just have the option to do the basic stuff, right? So in terms of customizability, how many different types of modules are available? And is it possible to develop new modules by yourself? So these are the things that you will discuss on that portion.
But sir, these three frameworks has good customizability.
Yes, I know. So you will mention in which terms these frameworks are customized. So Django already has a lot of inbuilt features, so the community will not really focus on that. So you will mention what are the things that are flexible in terms of that framework and the other ones. And since Python, Django is basically based on Python, so you will see a lot of Python developers developing the libraries. And the Next.js is probably JavaScript based, so you will see that it will be probably connected with the npm library, which already has like a millions of plugins, right? So you will discuss these things. And it's not going to be like okay, one is customizable, another one is not customizable. No, not that type of comparison. You will mention what are the libraries that are available, or what customization options are available. So for example, we were rendering our HTML files. So is it possible to use a different template engine in Django, or do we have to use the Ginger template that is provided by Django? So you will dig into these things, and you will find out whether you can customize these things or not, right?
Yes,
But
sir.
but overall, don't really spend too much time. I actually gave this intentionally so that you don't really spend a lot of time in this, but rather you focus on the content that is discussed in this class, because the last 3 classes, including today's class, the things that we're going to be discussing is basically the culmination of everything. So today we are going to work with CSS. We are basically going to apply some CSS framework to our website, and also we're going to see something that we missed in previous classes, and also we are going to see how to do the authentication part. And hopefully in the next class, I will try to finish the CRUD operations. I don't think we're going to get the time to do the CRUD operations today. I will just show you how to submit the data through the form. I think I will leave the CRUD operation part, which means adding, deleting, and editing part. I think I will leave those things for the next class. And after I do that in the next class, I will introduce you to the front-end JavaScript framework called Vue.js. And then we are going to recreate the to-do list that we have done in week 6. Do you remember we have done something like this in week 6? A task list or to-do list. That was probably a horrifying experience for you, because it has a lot of compact code. So I think we had created a task list type, I suppose. You could add task, you could edit task, or you could delete task, and so. Do you remember that?
Yes, sir.
Right? So we're going to do the same thing, but using the Vue.js in the next class, inshallah. And on the last class, I will, it's going to be a complicated class. So on the last class, I will actually integrate the Vue.js into our website. So far our website has been, or our server. So far our server have been was a monolithic kernel, which means the server itself would render the website for us. But what if we want to also use a mobile application? The mobile application that does not really have a web browser or any kind of IoT device. So we would not really have a web browser to render the page. So in that case, we would want the server to give us only the raw data, and so that we could show it in our own way. So this is something that we're going to be doing hopefully in the next class or the next to next class, where we shall convert our full stack Django server into a backend. It's called a API endpoint. So we're going to be seeing that when we request the data, it will give us the data in the JSON format, and then using the JSON format, we are going to populate our front end. And you can populate the front end using a vanilla JS, no problem. But we are going to be using a JavaScript framework to do that, and that is going to be the Vue.js, inshallah. So
Sir.
and yes.
So is Vue.js cross-platform type, like for mobile and?
So Vue.js is a syntactic sugar for writing JavaScript code. So do you remember the task list we have done in week 6?
Yes, sir.
So in the task list, we had to make sure that the list is always up to date, right? So every time we add new stuff, or we delete some stuff, or we edit some stuff, we have to update the list. And I think the function was called refresh list or something like this, right?
Yes, sir.
So basically the Vue.js is going to do that for us. So we're going to say that, okay, it's going to give us a location where we can save the data, and then we can link those data into the actual HTML file. And every time I change the data, it will automatically update the front end for us. So we don't really have to check after every single update whether where are the components and how to update and everything. So the Vue.js will do that for us. Do you understand?
Yes, sir. But how will we make it cross-platform for mobiles also?
Okay, so what will happen is that I will just show you the front end for. I'm just going to separate the front end and the back end, and any mobile application or anything that is connected, any device that is connected to the internet will have some API to, or some library to call an API. So for example, the ATM booth that we use, they execute some API request to the server, and they get the data and show it to the page. So if you talk about the Android application or the iOS application, they will have their own library to call the API. So we are just going to make our server an API based server. So it will, when anyone does any kind of, sends any kind of request, it will just send the data. Have you developed any application in Android?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so Android has a library called Volley. So Volley is specialized for sending these types of API requests. I don't know. I think Volley was popular probably 5 or 6 years ago. I don't know which one is popular right now. But the basic idea is the same, that any kind of app, when you load the front end, you just send the request to the server. It gives you the raw data, not the HTML file. And then using that raw data, you populate the front end. So this is how we actually isolate the front end from the back end.
Yes,
Does
sir.
that make sense? Okay. And there's one other thing that we're going to be doing in the last class, inshallah, and that is my plan is that after splitting the full stack server into the front end and the back end, I'm going to show you one other thing that is very popular, and this is called the progressive web application, or PWA. So what that does is, by writing very little code, you can convert your website into a mobile app and Android application. So I'm going to show you how you can do this, or an iOS application. So it's actually very, very easy, and you can even have the option to show that please install the app into your computer or your mobile and everything. So I don't know if you noticed this or not, but it is actually there in it is already there in a lot of Google applications. So sometimes when you go to your drive, it will ask you that there is an app available for the drive. Do you want to install it? Have you seen something like this?
Yes,
It's
sir.
not very common. So this is what a progressive web application is. And so we're going to see how we can convert our website into a progressive web application. So this is the first part of our last class, and then I will try to shed some light on two other micro frameworks. One is the Flask, another one is going to be the Express.js. So I was always in a dilemma in terms of this course, whether I shall be teaching you Django or Flask, because I always felt that Flask is easier to pick up. So, but I thought that since Django is very popular and it has a lot of battery, I should spend more time on Django in this course. But I really wanted to show you about the Flask. So at the end of the class, at the end of the course, I will actually talk about a little bit about the Flask and also the Express.js. Yes, Heather? I think I'm talking too much regarding the content.
আসসালামু আলাইকুম স্যার। স্যার একটা জিনিস বলতে চাচ্ছিলাম যে আমাদের গত মানে এই সপ্তাহ আর পরের সপ্তাহ অনেক চাপ পড়ে যাচ্ছে, মানে সব কোর্সের অনেক কিছু। তো অ্যাসাইনমেন্টটা যদি একটু ডেডলাইনটা বাড়াই দিলে ভালো হতো আমাদের জন্য।
You can trust me on
অনেক
this.
সিটি পরীক্ষা
I know.
অ্যাসাইনমেন্ট।
I know. You can trust me on this that you will not. It will not take more than 1 hour to do the assignment. And if you spend 1 hour, I think it's enough to get a full mark on the homework. Yes, Sanjit?
Sir, I think the assignment will be easier for like doing it in 1 hour. But sir, মানে অনেকগুলো কোর্স নেওয়ার কারণে আসলে স্যার মানে অ্যাসাইনমেন্ট গুলো দেখা যাচ্ছে অনেকগুলো কোর্সে ফার্স্ট ইয়ার অ্যাসাইনমেন্টটাও দেওয়া হয়নি, ওগুলো স্যার সেকেন্ড মানে এই টাইমে এসে দেওয়া হতেছে ওগুলো স্যার এখন মানে
I understand.
খুব
So in that
অসুবিধা
case,
পড়ে
you can
গেছে
actually request those course teachers who have given the two assignments together. You can request them to actually.
আচ্ছা, ওনাদের ওই যে অ্যাসাইনমেন্ট 1 এর ডেট গুলো স্যার এই যে এই নেক্সট উইকের মধ্যে পড়ছে, আর যেগুলো সেকেন্ড অ্যাসাইনমেন্ট ওগুলো স্যার মানে একদম শেষের দিকে লাইক 10th অক্টোবর বা 5 অক্টোবর এরকম স্যার ডেডলাইন গুলো দেওয়া।
I understand.
এই জন্য স্যার আর কি বলতেছিলাম যদি সেকেন্ড যে অ্যাসাইনমেন্টটা দিয়েছেন এটা ডেটটা যদি স্যার একটু এক্সটেন্ড
So
করা।
I understand, but think about it. It takes 1 hour to do it, and I have given you how much time?
Nearly 1 week.
Yes, 1 week. So you cannot find 1 week for this home assignment.
স্যার আসলে আমি শিডিউল করতেছিলাম, আমার আসলে কোনো দিনই স্যার ফাঁকা নেই।
Just sleep less for 1 hour in one night within the next 1 week. Okay, I think 1 week is enough, and increasing it would just be a trouble for everyone. Yes, Arnav? Yes, Arnav?
Sir, this assignment is handwritten or?
I did not really mention anything, so you can do it in Word, or you can type, or you can write.
Okay, sir.
স্যার নেক্সট উইকে কি স্যার আমাদের আবার কুইজও তো আছে স্যার?
Yes, we're going to have CT5 on Sunday.
স্যার তো স্যার হচ্ছে স্যার কুইজও থাকবে স্যার নেক্সট সানডে স্যার, এটা সাবমিশন স্যার। স্যার
Again, don't find excuses. I don't think I have given you this much so that you will have to reschedule everything. Okay, so
Sir?
I think you will be able to do this. Yes, Ahmed?
So is our next class is tomorrow?
Oh yes, we have an extra class on Monday. Yes, we have an extra class on Monday also. Anything else?
স্যার
Yeah, the class is going to be tomorrow.
Yes, there's going to be class tomorrow, inshallah.
Sir,
স্যার আমাদের CT5টা কবে হবে?
The CT5 will be on the last class, which means on the next week.
the topic, sir?
The topic is going to be based on model and today's class. So in today's class, we're going to be seeing how to create inheritance and then to do the authentication. So it's going to be based on the model and also based on today's class. Okay.
স্যার
Yes.
স্যার এখানে স্যার হচ্ছে স্যার টেবিল ফরম্যাটে যদি একটু বলতেন স্যার, এখানে স্যার লেখা স্যার হচ্ছে স্যার মানে স্যার 4টা কলাম হবে স্যার টেবিলে।
So there will be 4 columns, one for the topics that you're discussing, and then the 3 are going to be for the 3 frameworks that you're going to be comparing against.
স্যার কম্পেয়ারিং মানে
Yes.
ডিফারেন্সেস।
So the Django and Next.js, and also I think Laravel. Laravel. So these 3 will be on the 3 columns, and then you will have the topic.
স্যার সবার লাস্টে কি স্যার একটা প্যারা দিয়ে দিব স্যার, মানে কোনটা বেস কেন?
You will have to mention your justification and also your verdict, that why do you think this framework is good, or why do you think that framework is good, and so. So there is going to be 3 marks for each of the comparisons, and then 1 mark for this justification.
So resource তো আমরা ইন্টারনেট থেকে নিব।
Yes, you will mention the resource and also the reference. Okay.
Okay, sir.
All right. So that's a lot of pre-talk. Now, that's it.
Sir, I have last one question, sir.
Yes, go ahead.
Sir, here you have written, sir, first column you shall mention the comparing points. Sir, what does this mean, sir?
So I have mentioned a few comparing points. So you have popularity, you have customizability. I think there are you have community, and so. So these are going to be the initial comparing points, and if you want, you can also add your own points. But after you have covered the points I have mentioned, so this is the comparing points. মানে আমরা বায়োলজিতে অনেক সময় পার্থক্য লিখি না, পার্থক্য লেখার সময় টপিক বলে দিই না যে আছে রাইট, ওই জিনিসটা।
স্যার ওটা স্যার ফার্স্ট কলামে থাকবে স্যার?
Yes, the first column is going to be the name of the top comparing points.
Oh, okay, sir, just name.
Yes, just the names, and the discussion is going to be on the other columns.
Yes, sir, got it. Thank you.
All right.
স্যার আমার একটা কোশ্চেন ছিল।
Yes, go ahead.
স্যার আমার স্যার ওই গুগল মিটের মনে হয় স্যার ইনভাইটেশনটা স্যার ক্যান্সেল হয়ে গেছে, মানে প্রত্যেকবার স্যার ক্লাসে ঢোকার আগে স্যার রিকোয়েস্ট দিয়ে ঢোকার লাগে স্যার।
Okay, don't worry, you can just email me, I will add you to the invitation list.
আচ্ছা ঠিক আছে, থ্যাংক ইউ স্যার।
Okay, so can we start our class? I think we were just talking about other stuff. Yes, Mahmoud.
স্যার হচ্ছে ওই মানে রেফারেন্সের মানে যেখান থেকে নিচ্ছি আমরা মানে ইন্টারনেট থেকে কোনো হেল্প নিতে, সেটার জায়গাটা লিখে দেবো কোনটা?
Yes, you will mention the location or the website link. Okay. All right, I think that's all the questions we had. Now let's move on to our discussion. So we're going to have 2 parts into our class. On the first part, I am just going to style the home page and the other pages, and then I will also try to show you how to do the inheritance. There's a inheritance concept in templating that actually helps us a lot while organizing the HTML files. Okay, I have the slides ready, so if you want, you can also have a look at the slide. I did not really upload this. Just give me 1 minute so that I can upload it into the website or drive. So did you try to practice Django in your computer? Did it work? Did you try to download and run the files? I think I shared the codes with you. Did you try to download and run?
Sir, I kept having a problem while trying to run my Django project. I kept getting a timeout error, and then next it said the win error 160.
Okay. So did you look into the internet for the solution?
Yes, it had something to do with the Python files, some request files or something. I couldn't really understand it that well, but I tried looking it up on Google, but I couldn't find anything useful.
By any chance, is your Python 3.9?
No, sir, it's 3.8.8.
Okay.
Okay.
So
So,
if you want, I
if
can
you
also
want, I
have a
can
look.
have a look.
You can email me so that we can
So that
have
we can
a.
have a,
Okay, sir, I'll do that.
I can have a
I
look on
can have a
that.
look.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so I have shared the PDF with you on week 10. Let me share the link as well. So this is the link to the drive. You can download it and just have a look. So I have tried to simplify the concept, but it's there's a lot of concept going on here. So I would want you to focus into this class. Let me share the screen. Okay. So let's have a look at our code. I think it's in the desktop. We were trying to build a Facebook, but it looks nothing like Facebook. So we'll try to work on the looks first. So you can see the screen, right?
Yes, sir.
All right.
Yes, sir.
There is this folder called Facebook 2, and inside the folder we have another folder called Facebook 2. Why do we have two Facebook 2 folders?
So one is project folder and another one is app folder.
Right. So this folder is basically the Django project folder, and as we know that the Django actually has to divide all its component into something called the app. Now, when you see, you will see the other tutorials, you will find that they will always try to create a new app, and they will not really use the default one. But I thought it would be a waste of effort, so I decided to use that. But it's actually a good practice to create a new app when you're developing something. So the default app will be there. You will just connect it with the new app that you have created. So let's try to open the code and run the server to see what the state the server actually is in. We shall just only need the app folder. And what are the URLs do we have? So we have these URLs. Okay. So let's try to run the server. What was the command to run the server?
Sir, run server.
Yes, literally this is as easy as it gets, and we have to use the manage.py. So we are going to be mentioning Python manage.py and then run server, and then we also would want to run the server on port number 80 so that we don't have to mention the port every single time. Okay, so I think it's running. Let's try to see what it looks like. So this should be the home page. Okay, so this is how the home page looks like. And I think we have connected the app with the database using the model. And we are not really going to be working with the model, but we are going to be using them a lot today, inshallah. So, and I think we have also included one CSS file with it. So that's good. And we also have seen the admin panel. So what we're going to be doing is that today we are going to be working on the user module. But before that, let's try to format it a bit because it looks nothing like Facebook. So these are the data that we were fetching from the database. Now, we would like to have a card for each of these things. So in order to have the card or the CSS framework, we shall have to include them into our project. So I'm going to be using semantic UI because of the intuitive feedback, or I mean the syntax that they offer. Let me show that to you. So I'm going to be using semantic UI, and I'm going to be including them through the CDN. I'm not going to be downloading the CSS file because it's not really necessary. So when you're using semantic UI, you have to include 3 files. One file is the actual CSS file, and another one is the JavaScript file for doing the live actions. So for example, the drop down and some other things that are done using the JavaScript, they are written here. But the problem is that the semantic UI JavaScript is basically written using the jQuery. Have you heard of jQuery?
Yes, sir.
So jQuery is nothing. It's just a syntactic sugar. So it actually reduces the number of codes that you shall have to write using the JavaScript. So it was popular once, but now it's actually losing its popularity because of the other frameworks. So we shall have to include these things here. So let's try to copy this CSS file and then try to include this into our homepage. And where was the homepage? I think the homepage was here. So this was this file. Now, what we would want to do is that we would want to apply the framework first and then our CSS file, because sometimes we would want to apply changes to the existing framework. And to include a CSS file, we shall have to use which tag?
Link.
Yes, we shall have to use link. And when we are using link, we have to mention 2 things. One is going to be what is the relationship to the file that we are linking into our HTML file. Another one is going to be the reference or the location of the actual file that we are linking. So let's try to do that. So the first thing is going to be the relationship, which is going to be the style sheet. And the second one is going to be the reference or the hyperlink reference. So I have copied the link. I will just paste it here. This is the CSS file, and every time it's going to try to download it into the cache. And once it is available in the cache, it will not really download it again. So we are placing our CSS file at the end or after the CSS file import here, so that we can modify some part of it. And we shall have to also import the JavaScript file. And you tell me, what shall be the location of the JavaScript file? Where shall we put the script?
Before the end of body tag.
Excellent. So we don't really put it here because we have seen in the web optimization class that if we put a script here, what will happen?
Sir, it will load at the beginning.
Correct. It will load at the beginning, but JavaScript works are basically the background work. So the client will see that the page was blank for a lot of time, and then suddenly it has loaded. So it will actually reduce the user experience. So what we want is that we want to carry out the background task later. So that's why we would actually mention the script at the end. So before the end of the body tag, we're going to be mentioning script, and we are not really going to be writing any script. Rather, we're going to be linking an external one. So in order to do this, we have to mention the source. And the source is basically this JavaScript file. It will actually link that script here. Now, if I run it like this, it will actually give me an error because this JavaScript file requires the jQuery. So before I import this JavaScript file, I actually have to mention the other one, which is basically the JavaScript or the jQuery. So let's try to find the CDN of the jQuery also. So in order to get the jQuery, if it does not really make sense right now, don't worry about it too much. We are going to back the topic very soon, inshallah. So I'm just importing the files, and now we're going to start working on the looks. So this is the website of the jQuery, but it's actually a good idea to use the same website because it can really pre-connect because the browsers are really smart. So I think I'm going to use CDN.js. Yeah, it was CDN.js. Okay. So I'm just going to go there, and I would like to get the JavaScript file from the jQuery file from the same website. Let me just copy this, and let me also include this before the JavaScript file of semantic UI. So I'm going to mention the source equals to this one. So before I do anything, let's try to run this and let's see what happens. Let me close this, and if I run this, so we're already starting to see some changes, but they are not how we expected them. We wanted it to look beautiful. It does not really look beautiful yet, but we will work on this. Do you see the changes? Do you see some changes in the page already?
Yes, sir.
I think we can see the font has changed, and also the background did not really work. So let me just remove the background for now. I think the background is right here. So I think we just did it for this purpose. So let me just get rid of this CSS file for now, or the code for now, and let's see how the original file actually looks. So it will not really work because it has already saved the CSS file. So I will have to press Ctrl F5 to do a hard refresh. All right, so I think it's good. Now let's try to incorporate some components so that it looks a lot like Facebook. So what we would like to do is that we would like to create a card for each of these things. If you remember that each of these things are coming from the database, and we would like to put them on a card so that it looks like a post. So in order to do that, we are going to be searching for the card inside the semantic UI. There are few components that we frequently use. For example, the table, the card, the segment, the container. So these are the 4 things that you would want to remember. So this is how the card looks like. And what I'm going to be doing is that every single thing actually has its own code. So the one that we like, we are going to be copying the code here first and see if it actually works here in our website. And then we are going to be slowly modifying these things. Now, I don't think I will get the time to show you how to upload the images. So I will actually omit this one. So we are going to be using an icon that looks like this. But it's not really, our post is not really about the images. So we are not going to be using this card, and not even this one, because if we want to build something similar to Instagram, we are going to be probably taking this one. But this is not the one. And this is usually for the accepting friend request or something like this. And not this one also, because it's all about text. And we could use this one, but it has the timeline, so we don't really want the timeline. We can obviously customize this, but it's best to have the pre-formatted ones. So this is more like it. We have the name, and there we could put the date, and then we could put the actual content. But the thing is that we also have a tag. If you remember, we had the tag, and then we have the name, the date, and also the content. So we have to find some way that has these things. So this looks nice. We are going to have the username and the date, and then we could have the tag. But it's actually, I would be looking for something where these two are separate and not in the same line. So let's try to find something like this. Now this. All right, so I think this one is nice. So we have the, I think we can put the username here, and then we can put the time here, and then the content, and here we could use the tag. So let's just copy this one. And you can see that the code is fairly simple. We can just copy this one and see if this works first, and then we can modify this one by one. Here we have the post, and let's try to remove the extra stuff. For example, we have the header, and we had a link to our profile page. Let's keep the profile link, but let's remove the welcome part, and then also the HTML part. So this is the part where we are generating the whole a list of the things. And here, let me just copy the card code, and let's see if we can get the same card here. Now, if I refresh this, we're actually getting the card. Now this looks nice. So let's try to create a similar outlook here. And what I would want to do is that I would rename this text so that it becomes easier for me to copy. So here, I would like to get the author. And here, I would like to get the date. And in the description, we are going to have, in the paragraph, we are going to have the content. And here, we don't really need another paragraph, so let's remove this one. And inside this check icon, we don't really want a check icon. Rather, what are we going to be placing here?
The tag.
Yes, the tag. So let's put tag here. And the cool thing is that when you're using a framework, you can actually mention the icon name, and if it is common, it will actually appear here. So there is a list of icons that you can find. I think it's going to be here. So if you click on this one, it will give you the list of the icons that are available. I think it's linked with the font awesome. So let's try to see if we can get the tag ready. If we get the tag, yeah, I think we have the tag right here. So I think it's good. So let's try to copy or let's try to put this one here. So it's going to be a for loop. So let me put the for loop on top. And then the content is basically going to be here. And the author is going to be here. And then the date is going to be here. And finally, the tag is basically going to be here. So let me remove all of these things because they are not really necessary right now. So we have the for loop, and in the for loop, for every single P in the post, we are going to do the same thing. So basically, it's going to create a card for us for every single post. So if I refresh this, I should be able to get 3 cards. Can you see that we get 3 cards?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Right. So we are getting now it's starting to look something better. All right, but we have a lot of work to do because clearly this does not really look like Facebook. So the first thing that we would like to do is that we would like to have the post taking up the whole page, but not the total page. So there are some common syntaxes that are available in a semantic UI that you can use over and over again, and most of the time it will work. For example, I know that if I want a particular container to take up the whole page, I can try to use a tag or a class called fluid. So I can mention that, okay, the card that we're using is going to be fluid. So let's see if that works. And it actually works. So you can use the fluid class in terms of button. You can use it in terms of card and so. But this does not really look very nice because it's actually very wide. And you will see that in most of the websites, you have the content centered in the screen. Have you seen that in the Facebook, the contents or the wall is basically in the middle of the page? And also in the blog pages, you will see that either it's on the one side or it is in the middle. And on the two sides, you have some controls, but the actual content is actually in the middle. It does not take up the whole space. Have you seen that?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Right. So if I want to do something like this, what I can do is I can wrap it inside a div, and I can actually write the flexbox code to have it a specific width. But the semantic UI will take care of it for me if I mention the class as UI text container. So if I mention text container, it will understand that, okay, this is going to be a text. And since this is a text container, it will automatically put it in the middle of the screen. Now we are seeing that it is actually in the middle. Now, since this is a text, it will try to enlarge the text a bit. So we're going to be seeing that the text is actually a bit bigger. But we can take care of this very soon. But I think this is good for now. And there's one other thing that I would like to make this tag not on the left side, but rather on the right side. So if I want to do that, I can easily do this by looking into this one, because this is a content. And what I can do is I can put the content on the right side by mentioning right align. It works for segment and the content. And it actually works. So it's on the right side. And there's one other thing that I would like to do before I move on to the top bar. And that is, I would like to have a user icon here so that we understand that, okay, this is basically the name of the user. So in order to get an icon, you would just have to mention the I tag. So I tag is basically for the user. So this is the content. And before that, I would like to have an I tag, and I would mention the class user icon. and we have to close the tag. And now we are getting some user icon right here. So the user icon is nice, but it's a bit big. So I want it to be small. So I would make it small. It should become smaller. And the color does not seem right. So it's actually too bright. So let's use gray. No, the gray does not really work. So let's try to put a circle here so that it looks like an icon. So circular should work. I think we are good. And the rest should be taken care of if we put this into the segment. So the text is currently a bit bigger right now, but when we put this into the segment, it will actually take care of that for us. So I think this is nice for the Outlook, and this is good as a post. Now let's focus on the top bar. So do you see that the Facebook has a menu bar or a top bar at the top?
Yes, sir.
And what color is that?
The blue.
It's actually blue, but it's not any blue. It's a special blue. So we're going to find out what the color is. But let's try to incorporate the menu first. So if you want to incorporate a menu, let's try to find it from the semantic UI. So in the semantic UI, let's find the menu. And there are lots of different types of menu available. And we just want a top menu. Now this is not what a Facebook menu looks like, because on the Facebook menu you have the Facebook text on the left side, and on the right side you have the controls. So let's try to find out a menu that looks like this, so it will actually make our life a lot easier. So this is not how it looks like. We are looking for a logo on the left side, and on the right side we should want to have some controls. So I think it's going to be not this one. I think this one is the one, but we have the logo right here, but the controls are here, but we can move it on the right side by using the right keyword. So let me just copy this, and let's see what happens. So we have a link. We are going to get rid of the link very soon. This is basically going to be our menu. So let's see how that looks. So this is the menu. So let's try to rename this by saying okay, Facebook. And these are the buttons that are basically these things. Now we want them on the right side. So we can create another menu here, which is going to be the right menu. So we can do something like this. If class UI right menu. And this would create a menu on the right side. And we can just copy the item here. This is going to create the buttons on the right side. So we can see that they are on the right side. Now, we don't really want to have these shades here. So if you want to get rid of these shades, you can use the secondary term. So if you use secondary, you actually get rid of the shades. So it becomes normal. And I would also want to get rid of the shade for this one also. So I'm just going to use secondary menu. Okay, so it does not really look very nice because we lost the shade, but let's try to create a background so that the menu looks more like the Facebook. So in order to get the color of the Facebook, we cannot really use any random blue because the Facebook blue color is specific. So let's try to find out that color. So Facebook color. So it contains all the list. So this is the blue color that we want, and this is the hexadecimal value that we want. Now we want this menu to have this blue color, and can you tell me how can we have this menu have the blue color? What property shall we have to modify?
Sir, in CSS we have to write UI menu.
Yes, we are going to actually assign an ID for this, but I'm just asking you what the attribute is going to be. Is it going to be color?
Yes, sir. Background color.
Yes, it's going to be background color. So if I mention color, it's going to be the fore color or the text color. So I would want to have the background color only. So let's go to our CSS file, but before, let's try to call it, give it a name. So I'm going to give it an ID, and let's call it the top bar. And in the top bar, let's select the top bar using the hash, and we're going to have the background color as this one. And let's see if that works. Okay, it's starting to look something. But the thing is that the 4 colors should actually be white. So the color should be white. So it does not really work because we did not really select the texts that are here, because all of these things are inside their own component. So what we can do is that we can make mention that, okay, inside the top bar, all the items that you have, for all of them, put the color as white. So do you remember that if I put another selector after one selector, what happens?
It selects all the child values.
All the child and the subchild values. So if I mention the arrow or the greater than sign, it would only select the immediate children. But if I don't really mention anything, it will select all its children and subchildren and so on. So this is what we are going to be doing. So we are going to be selecting all the items that are inside, and we're going to be setting the color as white. So let me remove this thing, and let's see if that works. Oh, it works. So it's starting to look something like this, and this should be bigger. So let's select this one. So this is the header item. So we would want to have a header item. So let's call it logo. And we are going to be saying that, okay, the logo should have a font size of maybe, so we can set the color or the font size, but what we can do is that we can use a relative font unit. So we can say that, okay, the container's font size is whatever, you can double it. You can mention 200%, or you can mention something called 2em. So if you mention 2em, what will happen is that the container font, it will just multiply it by 2. So if the container font is maybe 16 pixel, the 2em means that is going to be 32 pixel. So let's see if that looks nice. This looks a bit big. So let's try to use 1.5. This looks decent. Okay. So I think this is okay. All right. And so let's try to also set the fonts, and the fonts are okay, but let's try to set the fonts here. So we're going to be saying that, okay, all the text, we're not really going to be selecting all the components because we're using icons here. So we're going to be saying that, okay, all the div and all the H1 text, all of them should have a font family of Open Sans, because this is the easiest font to read. We are seeing that these are now Open Sans. Now they don't really have this font, so let's add them here also. So let's try to add the anchor tags also. And what else? I think all of them are, so they are now Open Sans font. So which one is missing? I think this is missing. So let's try to add the other headers also, H2, H3, H4. What was this? I think this is the div, and then we have the author. I think this is already Open Sans, so let's not really worry about this. All right, so here we would like to have 2 options. One is to go to the profile, another one is to do the login or the logout, and so let's remove the links, and let's just keep on 2 links. So the first one is going to go to the profile, take us to the profile, and the second one is going to maybe sign out, and let's remove this one. This sounds nice. Okay. And so let's try to link our profile page here. So we already have a link to the profile page, and let's just copy this href from the profile page right here, and let's remove this one because it is ruining the aesthetics. Let's put the link here. Okay, So I think it's good. So let's try to go to the profile page. I can already see that the link is active. If I click here, now I can see this. So it looks nice, but the problem is that the profile picture or the profile page still looks horrible. So what can we do about this profile page?
We can add this code in the profile page and then just edit and add something for
Exactly.
the profile.
So this is what we would do normally, that the CSS files that we had added here and also the scripts that we added here, we would just copy the whole thing on the profile page also. Now, this will create a lot of problem, because if we have a lot of files, every time I change one file in terms of style, I would actually have to update all the files. Do you see the problem?
Yes, sir.
So it becomes very hard to manage, right? Because every time I change, let's say for example, I decided that okay, the font size or the text and the title is going to be Facebook space 2. So everywhere I mentioned Facebook 2, I would have to go there manually and I would have to change all of these things. So that doesn't really look nice. So what we would want to do is that we would understand that almost 50% of the HTML code is CSS. So what we want to do is that we want to take all the common codes and we would want to put all the common codes in a common file. And in these individual files, which means the index.html and the profile.html, we would just want to write the uncommon code or the uncommon part. You tell me, what is the uncommon part in the homepage?
Sir, these cards.
Right. So the cards are basically the only new thing in this page, because if I go to the profile page, I would want to still have the same menu. So these things will be static. But in the profile page, I would probably like to see my username or my email and everything. So that content is going to be different. So for every single HTML, I have some common code and then I have some uncommon code. So what I would want to do is that I would want to put all the common codes into a common file. So let's try to see how we can do this using the Ginger template that Django offers. So I would go to the profile or the template page, and here I would create another HTML file, which is called the base.html. Let's call it base.html, because we're going to be inheriting from this base.html. And initially, let's just copy the whole index file here. And you tell me, this is the common file. So what are the common stuff and what are the uncommon stuff here? The common stuff is basically the imports. And what are the things that should be delegated to the other HTML file?
The top bar.
For this project, let's just keep the top bar fixed. Let's just say that the top bar is going to be exactly the same for all the pages. What else? Anything else? The cards, right? The cards are not supposed to be in the common files, because in some pages we're going to have the cards, and in some pages we're going to have the information, and so we would want to remove the cards from here. Now we would want to make sure that when the index.html uses this base file, it has the option to add these things into its own page. So when I remove this, I think this is the top bar. Let's keep it this way. And this is basically the portion that we would want to have for the index.html page. Now, the way to handle this is by using something called the block. So we're going to be saying that, okay, we're going to be creating a block here, and every single HTML file that inherits this file is going to write on this block. So let me show you what that is. So you're going to be declaring a block like this. So you're going to be saying that, okay, block, and let's say that this is going to be the body.
Sir, here is it the base HTML file is inheriting the index file, sir?
The opposite. The index file is going to be inheriting the base file. right? This is the child, and it's going to be inheriting all these things, and it's going to write its own thing in this particular block, right?
We are just putting the body of the index.html in the middle of the page.
Let's forget about the index for now. Let's focus on this one. So here what we are doing, we are putting all the common code, right? And we understand that in this part we would want to write something both in the index file and also in the profile file. So we are creating a block here so that we can write it here. So we have created a block, and the name of the block is called the body. So you can put create multiple blocks if you want. So let's just create another block called the title. Now in the title, we would obviously want to have the Facebook, but let's just also create another block here, and it's called title. And if we want to add something, if we decide to add something, we would say that, okay, it's going to be on the title side. So if we put something on the title, it's going to be visible on the top bar. All right, so let me show you how you can use this base.html into your own HTML file. So now let's remove everything from the index.html. Actually, not everything. Let's just keep only the content. And this is basically the uncommon part. Let me check whether we had put, yeah, I think it's good. Did I? Yeah, I think it's good. Okay, so this is going to be the only uncommon part for our index.html file. So let me just cut it. And the other files, other things, they are already in the base.html file. So I'm just going to be removing all of these things, and I'm just going to be putting this thing here. And the way I'm going to be telling Django that, okay, you bring this content here is by typing something like this. I'm going to be saying that, okay, extends, and we're going to be mentioning the HTML file in the same way we mentioned the template. So we're going to be saying the app name, facebook2/base.html. So by doing this, I actually inherited the whole base HTML file. Now in the base HTML file, I would like to write, or I would like to add these things into this HTML file. And how can I add these things here in the base HTML file? I shall have to write them in the mentioned. Did we put any place where we can add stuff?
Yes, a block.
The block. So we are basically going to copy this, and we're going to say that, okay, in the body part of the base HTML, you just add this stuff right here. Let me just cut this, and let me just put it here. This was in a previous lesson, but we couldn't really get the time to do this, so I thought this would be a good time to have this. If I run this, I'm going to get the same output. So just to make sure that we are rendering from the base HTML file, let's just add a comment here. So I'm going to be saying that, okay, rendered from base HTML. Let's comment this. This is hopefully what we're going to be seeing when we run the index.html file. Now let me refresh this, and the output looks exactly the same. There's no way to tell any difference. But if I now open the source, I'm actually seeing that this part is coming from the other file, or this is the block, and the other things are basically coming from the base.html. Can you see?
Sir, the index.html inherits the base.html.
Correct. Go ahead. Clarify your confusion.
Sir, here we mentioned that the block body, and then we gave code below. That means that it will just use the base HTML top bar code and then just render this.
So I'm mentioning the block body code here, and what it will do is that it will go to the base HTML and it will find the block body, and between this space, it will add that code.
Yes, sir. So if we want to, if we make another page, then we can also give different content in the body now.
Exactly, and this is exactly what we are going to be doing right now. So we are going to be writing our profile page also, but using the same concept. So let's try to do this as well. So we didn't really mention the title because in the home page we would want to have the title as Facebook 2. But let's also go to the profile page, and oh, the profile page is not coming from the HTML file. So let's create the profile HTML. So let's create the profile.html. It's actually coming from the HTTP response, and we have an about page, and I'm really going to get rid of the about page because we don't really need this. Okay, so in the profile page, we're going to do the same thing. We're going to be inheriting from base.html. So I'm going to be just extending the base.html. And here, I'm going to be mentioning the block body. And in the block body, let's just mention the name. Let's say, let's put the name here. And we're going to be working on this very soon. And we actually have to link this profile.html with the view and the URL. So let's try to do this. So this is the profile page so far. Now let's go to the URL, and in the URL I think we have the profile, and then we also have the views.profile, and then we have given it a name, and we don't really need the article and the about. So let me get rid of these things. So we already have it. Yes.
So this is very similar to the Blade template in Laravel.
Yes. So this is the purpose of teaching one web framework. So a lot of framework actually uses the same thing, the same concept. So it's not only in Django, you will also find it in Flask, and also you will find it in some PHP frameworks also. So the idea is that you learn one framework well, and then you just transfer the concept into another one. So that's the purpose of giving you the homework, so that you learn about the other frameworks as well. So you will just compare how they do the similar things in other frameworks. So let's try to update the view function for the profile. Let me go to the views. And here, I think we have the database, but we are not using this one. Rather, we are basically using this one. So let's remove this because it's taking up a lot of space. I think we have the person and the current year. I just showed you for the example, but I think we only need the post. So I think we also have the about page. I'm going to get rid of this because we're not going to be using this. And the profile page and the article. Let me get rid of the article also. And the profile, we don't really want to use the HTTP response because we have an HTML file now. So let's try to return an HTML file. So how do you return an HTML file as a response? What shall you do?
Sir, by using render.
Yes,
request.
by using the render. So like this. But in the profile, we are not really going to be passing down any context for now. So I'm going to be calling the render function, and then request, and then we're mentioning Facebook 2, and then profile.html. Let's see how that works. Let me remove this one. Okay, so now let's try to go to the profile page. I think we have a link to this. If I click here, now we can see we actually have the top bar right here, and here we are actually seeing the text that we have mentioned here. So can you see that now the index and the profile are actually much more manageable? We only have the data that we need to put for this particular HTML, and the common one is actually in the base.html. So if you want to include a maybe a font, you don't really have to go to all the pages. You can just add it to the base, and it will be included into all the files automatically. So do you see the benefit of using inheritance?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So these are the two things I think I had to talk about for the first part of our class. And now let me give you a 5 minutes of break. And after this, we're going to be seeing how we can implement the authentication system. So we're going to be using the user table for this, and we're going to be seeing how we can actually do the login and the logout part. If you have any confusion, you can also ask me. and I will be back on 3:45 inshallah. Okay, it's 3:45. Can I start? Are you here?
Yes, sir.
All right. This was very useful, I think, because often in times it becomes very difficult to manage a lot of HTML files. But so far, we have not really touched the actual thing. So the actual thing that we want to do is that we want to send some data, and then through the website, we want to store it into the database. Do we have any data in our website or in our database? We are using an SQLite database. Do we have any data in our database?
Yes, so we have the posts.
Yes, we have the post, right? So how did we create those posts? You remember?
command line দিয়ে করেছিলেন
So we used a command line, right? So the reason why we used a command line is because our interface was not really ready. But now I think the interface looks somewhat like the Facebook. So now we can actually start making the interface. So what we are going to be doing, the basic idea is very simple. So we're going to get our data from the from the form, and then we're going to send our data back to our server. And in the server, we're going to run the same code that we used to run for our shell commands. So for the shell commands, we used to create a post object or a story object, and then we would call the save function, right, to save that data into the database. So we're going to be doing exactly that, but the data is going to be coming from the form. Now, before we move on to the things, those things, we have two things to worry about. One is that the model that we were working with, which is basically this one, it has a foreign key. Can you see what the foreign key is? The foreign key is basically the connection to another table. And what is the table?
So user.
The user table. So the thing is that we have linked our data with the actual user. So what we are going to be doing is that we are going to be using the user table that Django provides us with. So in order to create a story, we are not going to take input of the username from the user, because we are going to be assuming that the user who has logged in is creating the user for his or her own wall. So when you log into Facebook with your user account, can you create a post of someone else?
No, sir.
No. So this is exactly what we're going to be doing. What we're going to be doing is that we're going to try to find out who the current user is, and then we are going to be creating the post for that particular user. So let me show you how we can get the data of the current user. So it's actually very easy, but you have to understand some bit of it. So let me try to show you how it actually works. So here we are hard coding the name, but what I want is that I want to send the username to the profile. And let's see how we can do that. So in order to do this, it's actually quite easy. So let me show you that. So remember the request object that we passed every single time? It contains a lot of useful information that we are going to be using today. And one of them is the user. So the request has a user object. And this user object is exactly the user object that we have seen in the last class. So in the last class, we have seen a user model that has the list of all users. So we had created one super user, I think it was Onyx, and another one is probably called the test user. So if we select one user, this is exactly what it is going to be like. Now, we did not really log in, so it does not really going to have anything here. But let's try to find out what the current ID is. So do you remember that every single user has what are the fields that a user has in the user table? Name, email, password, and I don't remember if I showed you, but it also has a first name and a last name, and also it has its own primary key that is called the ID. So we can access all of these things through here. So let's try to see what the ID actually is. So we can say that, okay, the ID is going to be basically user.id. Now, if we don't sign in, we are not really going to be seeing anything because there is no user. So Django calls it the anonymous user. So there is no ID for the anonymous user. So we are actually going to be seeing the none value in Python, which is equivalent to the undefined in JavaScript. So let me try to pass the ID here. So let me pass some ID is equals to ID. So this is going to be the context, and the key is going to be ID. And you can have anything you want. Let's just call it N in case you are getting confused. So we are going to send a key in the context variable, and the value is going to be the ID that we have received here. And let's show it here instead of the hard-coded name. So we are going to be passing the value of N. So let's just show it one more time. So from when I'm going to the profile page, I have a request coming from the client, and in the request body, I will check whether there is any active user or not, if the user has logged in or not. And we will try to get the ID of that user. Now, if there is no user logged in, what will be the ID?
Sir, undefined.
It should be undefined in JavaScript, but since we are using Python, it's actually going to be none. Both are actually the same thing, almost. So here we should be able to see the none here. So let's try to go to the profile page, and this is exactly what we see. Can you see?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Now remind me, how many users do we have?
So 3 or 4.
I think we are 2. One is the super user, another one is probably the test user. Don't worry. But what is the ID of the first super user, the Onyx Hoque? It's going to be
1.
We remember that in the models of Django, the primary key actually starts with 1. So we don't really have the option to sign in from our website, but we do have an admin panel. So the admin panel actually gives us the option to sign in. So let's try to sign in from this admin panel. So I'm not sure if I remember the password. The password is probably QWERTY. Now I have actually logged in, and the data or the information is basically saved in the cookies. In the cookies, now I have the CSV token and the session ID. Now the session ID actually should contain, if I'm not mistaken, the session ID should contain the actual user information now. So every time I am passing down any kind of request to the server, it is also passing down the user information that I actually have right now. So now I am logged in as Onyx Hoque. And what is the ID of Onyx Hoque?
So 1.
1. So let's have a look at the users. So this is the first user, so the ID should be 1. Now, if I go to the profile page again, and if I refresh it again, what shall I see?
Sir, all the user information from that session.
What am I passing here?
Sir, only ID 1. It will show
Only
1.
ID. So I should be able to see the 1 here. So if I refresh this, I should be able to see 1. Can you see?
Yes, sir.
And not only that, I can actually pass down some other thing as well. For example, I can pass down the email, and I should be able to see the email here. Can you see the email?
Sir, what happens if we just pass down user?
That's a very good question. If I pass down the user, I actually can access all the items of the user in the template. That's a very good point. And this is exactly what you would want to do, right? You would want to pass down the whole user, and in the profile, you would want to use the email, the ID, and everything, right?
Yes, sir.
The thing is that Django actually has taken care of that for you. So you don't really have to pass down the user into the context. So you can actually remove the context, and you can directly access the user from here. So let me just comment this out. And we can directly access the user information from here. So here, I can actually access the user using the user variable. So the user will now have the current user or the login user. And if I want to get the user ID, I can just type user.id. I don't have to mention the request here, and I would be able to get the user ID here, and that is one. And if I mention the first name, I should be able to get the first name here, which is Onyx. And let's just also put this last name here. And so we are going to be seeing that we get the full name here. Do you understand?
Yes, sir.
All right. So the key takeaway from this discussion is that when you have an active user, you can access that active user using the request.user in the views.py, and in the template, it automatically passes the user for you. So you don't really have to pass it through the context. You with me so far?
Sir, can we add Python code in the Ginger?
We are already doing. So the Ginger code is basically like Python, but not quite. For example, if you want to access certain attributes, for example, certain Python function, you will actually have to use something like this. So if I want to get the length of this, I will have to mention this and then length. So this would give us 4 and then this. So it's like Python, but it's not Python.
So what if we want for loop, while loop?
So you already have a for loop and while loop in Ginger, don't you? This one?
Yes, sir, yes.
But you cannot really run extensive code. You will have to process the data, and you will have to send the data accordingly into your Ginger template. The access is limited, but I think this is sufficient. All right. So I think we understand the idea of having a session. So this is not exactly a session, but this is an authentication session. But you can also have any type of session you want. But I don't think we are going to be using this in today's class. So let me just try to show you how we can do the login by ourselves. But before that, let's try to modify the profile a bit. And what the problem is going to be is that when the user is logged out, what are we going to be seeing here? We have the name right here, but when the user is logged out, what shall we see?
Sir, none.
So we are really going to, so the ID is going to be none, but we are going to be seeing that there is no username or the first name or the last name. So if I refresh this, or if I just sign out, and then if I try to load this page, I'm actually going to be seeing blank. So that's a problem, because if there is no user, we want to say something that you are not logged in or something. So in order to understand whether a user is authenticated or not, there is a value for this, and you can use this also in the view. But what you will have to do is you will have to mention something like this. There's an attribute called is authenticated. So you can say that if user dot is authenticated. So if the user is authenticated, in that case, show the first name and the last name. Else, we would want to say that you are not signed in. So this is the data that we would want to show. We are going to format this in a second. And else, we would want to say that paragraph, you are not logged in. And then we're going to close the loop or the condition. So let's see if that works. So we are currently not logged in. So we should be saying you are not logged in. So if the user is authenticated, in that case, show the first name and the last name. Otherwise, show that you are not logged in. So let's try this one more time. If I try to log in again using the username and the password, if I refresh this, what shall I be able to see?
So the first name and last name.
The first name and the last name, exactly. So if I refresh this, I should be able to see the first name and the last name. Now this looks good. All right. So I want to decorate it a bit. So the first thing that I would like to do is that I would like to put it on the center. and I would also like to have the email at the bottom of this. So it's going to be a header, and then we're going to have the email. So let's try to have a div here, and so we can put the div here. So let's put a div, because either we're going to show the text or we're going to show that the message. So let's put a div here, and the div is basically going to be UI. Let's put it in the text container so that it's in the middle, and then let's also put this thing inside a segment so that it is raised class UI segment. So the container is basically containing everything, and inside the container you will have multiple segments. This is part of the CSS framework of semantic UI. Let me show you how that works. So this is a segment, and inside the segment, if the user is logged in, you either see this or you see something that looks like that. So this is the user segment, or the segment, and then you have the container. So if I run this, so I'm seeing something that looks much better. But the first thing is that I would want to see the text in the center. So we can put it on the center. I think we have to mention center aligned. Okay, so now it's in the center, and we would want to put it as a big text. So we're going to be saying this is going to be an H2. So this is an H2, and we would want to have a big user icon. So what was the tag to create an icon here? What was the tag to create an icon?
Sir, I.
So we have to use an I tag. All right. So we're going to use an I tag, and we're going to be saying, okay, this is going to be a user icon or user icon. So this is a small user icon. So let's make it big. So let's make it big. Not big enough. So let's make it huge. Okay, that sounds good. And let's put a circle here. Huge circular user icon. That looks nice, but we want to match it with the theme. So let's put it as blue. So blue. All right. So this looks better. And there's one other thing that we would like to do, and that is we want to put the email address here. Can anyone tell me how can I get the email address of the current user?
So user.email.
We have a email field here. So we can use user.email. So now we have this. Now this looks like a profile page, but we don't really, if you want, you can get rid of the raised bar here, but I think this looks nice. If you want to get rid of the raised bar in the segment, you can use a secondary. So this would, I think basic segment. Yeah, so if you use basic segment, it would actually get rid of the bar for now for you. But I think this looks nice. All right. So we want to do the same thing for this one. So we are already in the segment, but we want to add an icon if the user is not logged in. So let's try to log out and let's see how it looks. So this is how it looks. So we want to add an exclamation sign here. So let's try to add another icon. It's obviously going to be a huge circular icon, but we are going to be using exclamation. Exclamation. So this sounds nice, but the circle doesn't look nice, probably. Let's try to use orange or red. Red is too much, so orange. Let's get rid of the circular part. I think this should do. And let's use H3 for this. Okay, so this looks better. And after we have done the sign-in part, we can add a link to this so that every time you're logged in, you can also access this. So is it understandable so far?
Yes, sir.
All right. Now let's try to work on the login section, because we don't really want the users to go to the admin panel every single time they want to access or put their username and the password. Now, in order to put the username and the password, we would want to have create a form, and through the form we would get the username and the password. So if you think about it, you will have to design two URLs for this. Let me show you what I mean. So in the URL, if I want to create a login system, I would have to mention two things. One, the link where they would actually get the form, and once the form is loaded, they will put their username and the password. And after putting the username and the password, they will submit the form somewhere, right?
Yes, sir. Post.
Yes, it's going to be a post, right? So it's going to post it to some other location. So we will have to mention two URL. One for getting the form, another one for posting the actual data. Does it make sense? Do you understand what I'm saying?
Yes, sir.
All right. So the thing is that we don't really want to create two URLs every single time we want to implement a form. So we are going to hack our way into it, and we're going to use a shortcut. And the shortcut is actually very common. The one that we are going to be doing is that we can actually distinguish whether the request is a GET or a POST. So when you are typing a URL on the address bar, the request that we are receiving here is a GET request because it is trying to get the website. And when you're submitting your form through any kind of URL, it's actually a POST. So what we can do is that we can create one single URL, and inside that URL we can check whether the request is a GET request or a POST request. If this is a GET request, what shall we do?
We shall just display the page.
Correct. We shall just send the form. And if this is a POST request, what shall we do?
We need to maybe attach some backend
Nothing
code to it.
attachment. We just get the data from the post and then we add it to the
database.
Yes, we add it to the database. So you see how we actually are using the shortcut. Instead of using two URL, we are going to be using only one. Let me show you how that works. So let's try to create a login interface or a login URL, and Django already has a function called login. So in order to avoid conflict, I'm going to be using the term sign in. Actually the same. So we are going to be using sign in for every single one. And the name is going to be sign in. And in the view, we are going to be creating a function called sign in, the one that we mentioned here. And here we are going to be rendering some page. Now we didn't really create a sign in page, and the sign in page would not look like the other pages. So let's try to create another page called the sign in page. Let me get rid of the about page. Let's create an HTML file that contains the forms. Sign in .html. So this is the sign in.html file, and what we would want is that we can actually inherit the base template, but it would also bring the top bar, but we don't really have time to isolate those things. We can create multiple levels of inheritance, that's possible, but let me just create the HTML file and just import only the CSS file. So we're going to be saying Facebook to sign in page. And inside the body, basically, we are, let me just also add the CSS, but let's just keep it for now. So if you want to create a form, all you have to do is mention the form tag. I'm not sure if I have shown you form before or not, but the form is basically some input fields, and you send the data to some location. So when you're mentioning the form, you have to mention two things. So the first thing is that you have to mention what the method is. And the method that we're going to be sending, using is post, because we are posting some data to the server. And when you are accessing the server through the address bar, this is basically the get. You can also send the data through the get method, but it's going to be visible to everyone. Since we are passing down the username and the password, we are not really going to be using the get method. And the second thing that we have to mention is the action, which means, I always forget the term action. The action actually means what is the location where we are going to be posting the data. What is the URL? So what is going to be the URL for posting the data?
So sign in
is going to be the same, right? It's going to be the same as the HTML location. So how are we going to distinguish between the form and the other stuff? By checking the method. Okay, it might seem confusing for now. Let me just continue with this, and you will get an idea very quickly. So the location is going to be the same as this URL. So let me get this URL's address, and if you want to get the URL address, you have to call the URL function. And in the URL, let's mention sign in. Thus, we are going to post the same data into the same location. And let me show you how we can handle this. And in the form, we are going to have two inputs, one for the username, another one for the password, and another one is basically the submit button. You can use anything else, but you have to mention the type as submit. So one is going to be input, type is going to be text, you can mention this, and the name is going to be how we can extract that data on the server side. So let's create the name as user. So when we say on the server side, okay, give me the user, it will give me the input of this one. And let me also create another input called pass, which will hold the password, and the type is going to be password because we don't want the text to be visible. Have you seen that the password fields are different from the text field, other text fields?
Yes, sir.
So if you type something, you will not really be able to see this. So for that, you have to mention the type as password. All right. Now let's try to create another input called button. Input type is going to be submit. So if you mention submit, it's going to be a button, and you will mention the value, which is going to be the text of that button. So we're going to be saying sign in. So this is all you need to get the data from the client side to the server side. So you get two fields. One is the user field, another one is the pass field. So whatever I pass here, we should be able to say this. And once you press the submit button, it's going to send this data into this particular URL. So let's see if that works. But for that, we have to update the views. So in the views, what is the first thing that we shall have to check?
The request type.
The request type. And the request type is basically the request method. So we're going to be saying that if the request dot method is equal to get, then we understand that this is basically asking for the page. This is not submitting any data. So we are going to be rendering the sign-in page. So we are basically going to be returning return, and we are going to be rendering, and we pass down the request and also Facebook 2, and the HTML is called signin.html. So we are basically passing down this. So let's see if this works, and if this works, we are going to be working on the other stuff. So let's go to the sign-in page. So this is actually giving us the form. It looks very simple. We're going to take care of the looks for very soon, but this is the basic thing. Now, this part is the username and this part is the password. So if I put some data here and press this button, it's going to get all this data and post it into this URL again. So for that, we are going to be keeping another check called else if, which is elif in Python. So we're going to be checking that if the request method is going to be post. In that case, let's just return an HTTP response saying that, okay, you have posted these and these data. So let's return an HTTP response by saying that, okay, you have submitted user equals to the username, and the password is basically going to be the password. Now, let me show you how you can get the username and the password that was posted. It's actually very easy. So the way to get those things is by typing request, because it's going to be in the request, and the method was post. So we have a post object that will hold those data. So the post, and it's basically a dictionary. So you would want to use a get function to get the value based on the key. So how many keys did we have in our form?
Sir, text and password.
The user and password, right? These are the types. So the keys are actually user and pass. So we are going to be getting the user, and the user is, if the user is not found, we are going to be putting empty here, and let's just put it in the u variable, and we're going to be doing the same thing to get the password. So we are going to be getting the pass, and we're going to be getting here. And let's just use an f string, which is basically like a template reader in Python or in JavaScript. So we can put, or you might get confused. Let's just confuse. So we are going to be using printing u, and then password is going to be equal to p. So if the URL is posting something, someone is posting something into the URL, we are basically going to be showing the input that we have done here. So let's see if we can get the same thing here. Let's try to add 1, 2, 3 and password as also all ABC. And if I try to sign in, it actually gives me an error because the Django is very secure, and it does not really allow you to post a random form. So you every time it generates a form, it will assign it to a token, and you will actually have to have the token here. So let me show you how what that is. So this is the form. Let me open up the source of this form. So is there any extra field in this form, or only the inputs that we have mentioned? Is there anything extra?
No, sir.
Only the things that we have put here. So let's see what happens if I copy this here. So this is the CSRF token that I have to put inside the form. So let me copy this inside the form. So this is going to be here. Now let's try to load the page again. The page looks very similar, but if I open the source here, I can see that there is one more input here. Can you see?
Yes, sir, a token.
Yes, a token. So the token is unique, and it's different every single time. So what happens is that if you don't use this token, the Django will not allow you to post any data, because in that case, it will become very easy for running the DDoS attack. So we don't really want that. So that's why we are using the token. All right, so now let's try to submit something. So we are going to submit 1, 2, 3 and ABC. And if I submit here, actually going to show me that what I had submitted. Can you see that we are in the same URL, but we are getting the different results?
Yes, sir.
Right? So this is exactly what we want. We want the one URL, but two different behaviors. One for getting the page, another one is for submitting the username and the password. Now, the username and the password needs to be validated, because we're going to take the username and the password, and we're going to check whether it's in the database or not. But we don't really have to do this because Django actually has functions for this. So we don't really have to look up into the database for us. Django will do that for us. So for this, we shall have to import some functions. So we are going to be importing from Django.config. You don't have to remember this. It's in the PDF. I think it's called auth import. I will be importing 3 functions. One is going to be authenticate. Okay. And another one is going to be the login. Another one is logout. Okay. So these are the functions that I would like to import. And what I want now is that we would like to authenticate. So we are going to be calling this function, and in this function, we are going to be passing down the username and the password. And if the username and the password combination is valid, it will return that actual user interface or the instance. And if the username or the password is not valid, in that case, it is going to return as a none value. So how do we understand whether the username and the password is correct or not? By checking the
authenticate, by using the authenticate function.
By using the authenticate and by checking the return value, right? So
yes,
let's do that. So let's create a variable called user. You can create anything you want. Let's try to create I don't know, actually random names. Let's create user and call the function authenticate. And in the authenticate, you pass down the username is equals to you, and the password is equals to pass. I make a mistake. Oh, we don't have a username. We have p. All right. So if the username is none, then what do we understand?
Invalid login details.
Invalid, right? So if user, the way to check none is not equals to do the checking. You use is none. Then we understand that this is an invalid username or password. So in that case, we return an HTTP response by saying that it's an invalid password or username or password. And else, if the username and the password is correct, what shall we do? If the username and the password is correct, what
so
shall
we go
do?
to the home page.
We have to go to the home page. Now, before we go to the home page, we actually have to register the user. So the authenticate will not automatically register it for us. So it will just authenticate. So in order to register, we have to mention this function, the login function. So in the login function, we have to pass down two things. One is the user object, which is this one. Another one is the request. So if the username and the password is valid, we just log in by mentioning the request, and then also mention the user instance that we want the user to log into. And then you might be thinking that, okay, here we are going to be rendering some the homepage HTML. But this is not what we are going to be doing, because we are in a URL for sign in. We want the browser to go to another URL now, and that is the homepage URL. So this is not rendering, this is called redirect, which means that we are currently in the sign in, but we now go to another page, or we will see that the URL will change and it will actually take us to the homepage direction. So in order to do that, we shall have to call another function which is similar to render, and it's called redirect. And the redirect is actually much easier than the render, because all you have to do is just return the redirect, and here you just mention the name of the URL or the absolute URL. So the name of the home page is basically home-page. So let me do that, home-page. So if the username and the password is valid, in that case, we are going to log in, and then we are going to go to the home page. And if the username is not valid, in that case, we are going to be showing the invalid username or password. Is it clear so far?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So if there's any confusion, please let me know. I know it's too much.
Sir.
Yes?
Sir, won't we pass something in the redirect?
So we don't really have to pass anything in the redirect, which means this means that it's going to send a request into the home page. The request is automatically go there, and everything that has to be done there is going to go there. So
yes,
we are
sir.
just passing the ball to the other code. That's it. Okay. So let's see how it goes. Let's try to do the sign in again. And if I do the same thing, we are not going to sign in. It's going to say that it's going to be invalid username and password. Now let's try this one more time. And here, if I try to give the correct username and the password, this is the correct username and this is the password. And can you see that we are in the home page?
Yes, sir.
Not only that, if I now go to the profile page, I can see that we have now logged in. So this is how we can actually log in. So this is assuring. So we see how we can actually log in right now. And now the thing is, just a second. Just a minute.
Sir, we also have to add the logout, sign out.
We have to also add the logout. So the logout is very simple. You don't have to do anything. Just call the logout function and just pass the request. Okay, I will show you this in a moment. But we have to take care of something much more important, and that is we cannot just show the invalid username and password in a empty page. Can you tell me what is the usual behavior when someone tries to log in and the username and the password is not correct?
It shows a message.
It shows a message where? Into a
In the
different
login
page?
form. In the login form.
Inside the login form, right? So this is exactly what we want to do. We want to show some message that the username and the password is not correct inside the form. So we want to get the data back to the form. Now, we are currently now in the view. We are going to not return an HTTP response. Rather, we are basically going to this page again, or we are going to render the page again. But here, we would want to send a message showing that the username and the password is not correct. So in order to do this, we are going to be using something called the messages framework. So this is also part of the battery that we have right here. But before I do that, let's try to put a bit of looks. Let's work on the looks here. So let's try to import the CSS file. I think it's here. We're not really going to be importing the other CSS files, for example, or the JavaScript file. We're just going to use this because we just want to have our form. So let's see what kind of forms do the semantic UI offer. So here, I think we have the form. So there are different types of forms here. So I think the first one is nice. This is the first one. So let's copy this and remove a lot of the things from here. So this is a form. Okay, so this is a form, and let me just test it here. And the first thing that we're going to be checking whether this actual form works or not. The sign-in page. Okay, so this looks okay. And so let me migrate all of these things here. So we have to have the CSRF token inside the form. And in the form, we have to have a method, and then we would want to have a URL or the action. So let's put that here. And what else do we have? We have the first name, but the first name is basically going to be the username. And then we have the input, and in the input we have the name. The name was user, and the placeholder is going to be user name. And the second field is going to be the password, and the type is going to be password, and the name is going to be pass. Placeholder can be anything. I think the password does not really show anything. Okay, and then we have a checkbox, but we don't really need a checkbox here, so I would remove this. And then instead of the input submit, we have the button submit because we want to style them, but we have to mention the type as submit. and this is going to be sign in. And we want the button to have a blue color, so we're going to be using the primary color. You can also use blue. So let's see if it works. So now it looks better. And now let's remove this thing from here. And so this is how it looks now. And I would like to take, I would like this button to take the whole width of the container. And I would be very happy if you can tell me how can we make the button have the whole width. What class shall we have to use? Do you remember?
বাটনের সাইজ কি বড় করবেন এরকম কিছু?
Yeah, so I want the button to have the whole width of the container.
হিউজ স্যার হিউজ করতে
Huh?
Sir, width 100%.
Yeah, these things are all there, but since we are using a web CSS framework, we shall have to use
হিউজ ইউজ করছিলেন স্যার
what is the name? The name is
বিগ আর একটা ছিল হিউজ
fluid, right? If I use fluid, I get the whole width. So this is actually common in a lot of things, especially the container and the button. But this still looks horrible. We want it to be centered in the horizontal side and also in the vertical side. And this is exactly what I asked you in the home page, in the midterm, that how to center something horizontally and vertically. So I'm going to ask you again, what shall we have to do if I want to center these things horizontally and vertically? If I use Flexbox, then
Sir, justify content center.
Excellent. Justify content for horizontal or vertical?
Align item center.
Very good. So this is if you don't learn anything from this course, just learn these two things: how to center an item inside a screen horizontally and vertically. This is all I asked you. Okay. So all right. So what I would want to do is I want to center them. Okay. So let's create a div. We can also use the body. So let's actually use the body. So this is the body, and the style is basically going to be height. The height is going to be 100 vertical height, and the display is going to be flex. And then we are going to say that the container should be, or the item should be justify content as center, and also the align items should be center. Can anyone tell me what is the default value of the align item?
Sir, flex start.
এটাই মনে হয় তাই না, কিন্তু আসলে এটার ডিফল্ট ভ্যালু হচ্ছে স্ট্রেচ। সো তুমি যদি কিছু না উল্লেখ করো তাহলে পুরোটা স্ট্রেচ হয়ে থাকবে। Okay, you can change it to flex start, so it will be like this, but actually the default value of the align items is actually stretch. So if I do this, let's see what happens. So this looks okay. Okay, if I, all right, but I want it to be a bit more wide. So let's try to create a, and also I want some border here. So I would want to have a div, and in order to get a border, I would want to use a segment. So I would mention class UI segment. If that works. Okay, so now we have a border, and we want it to have min width of maybe 50%, maybe. So that sounds okay. It's too much. All right. So I think min width, let's have a fixed min width, and that is maybe like 200 pixels. I don't know. That's 500 pixels. Much. 400 pixels. About right. Now let's reduce it a bit more. This looks better. And also we would like to have a header here. So let's put a header, and let's put a header h2 sign into Facebook 2. This looks okay. And I would like to have it in the center. So let's put a style here, text align. So this looks better. And we would want to do one more thing, and that is that if the username and the password is not correct, we would like to show it here, not in some other places, right? So in order to do this, we have a battery that Django gives us, and this is called messages. So let me show you how you can send message from the server and you can get it from the template into the template. So in the views, when we say that, okay, the user is none, we understand the username and the password is invalid. So we want to send this exact message back to the HTML file. So before we render that HTML file, we are going to add a message to the request. So let's add messages, or let's import messages. Let's say from Django.contrib import, I think, messages. I'm not mistaken. So you have the authentication battery, and then you have the messages battery. Now you can have different types of messages. For example, you can have warning, you can have error, you can have info, and so. But for now, we are going to be using error. So if the message is none, we're going to be saying that, okay, messages dot error, and we have to pass down the request first and then the actual message. And then we would have to mention, we would actually have to render the sign-in page again. So let me copy this and paste it here. What we have done is that if the user is none, then we added a message into the request, and then we rendered using the same request to this particular HTML file, so that we can get some the same page again, but now with the message. Nothing will happen if I try to run this now, because we didn't really do anything to show the message. So let me try to show you how to show the message. In the sign-in page, here on top of the button, we would like to show the message. Now the messages will come as the context variable. So it will literally be called the messages, and there can be multiple messages. So you will have to iterate them one by one, like a for loop. So in order to do this, we're going to be saying something like this, that, okay, for m in messages, we would like to let's close the for loop in for, and let's just show the message in a paragraph for now, and let's see how it looks. So this is the message that is being passed from the server. And the good thing about this is that the messages are for one time. So once you view the page and refresh the page again, you will not really be able to see the message again. So this is one time. So it will take care of this for us automatically. So if I now run this and try to sign in using a different username and the password, or let's say 1 and 2. And if I sign in, now I can see that the message is actually shown here. Can you see?
Yes, sir.
All right. And the good thing is that you can pass as many messages as you want. So if I want to push another message, and if I refresh this, it will actually go away. It should go away. It's actually submitting the same data. But if I refresh this, this actually goes away. So in the views, I can actually add more stuff. I can actually say that, okay, there's going to be another message called info. And here we can say that, okay, there's going to be extra info. So if I refresh this and try to submit something, it's going to give me this one and this one, because we are using a for loop. So it's going to show us all the messages that we are passing here. The last thing that we would like to do here is that we would want to add a message box. And Semantic UI has a message box But Bootstrap also has a message box like this, but the type of the messages that we mentioned here are actually in line with the Bootstrap. And in the semantic UI, for some reason, it does not really work. So I'm just going to use manual color, because here we are only going to be showing error messages. So the message box is going to be red. So let me show you how that looks. In the HTML file, we are not going to be putting it into the paragraph tag. We can actually put in the paragraph tag, and we're going to be saying that, okay, the class is going to be UI message. It's a semantic UI class name. So if I try this again, we should be able to see two different messages here. Can you see?
Yes, sir.
So these are the messages that we can see. And let's just get rid of this extra information. But since this is an important thing, or there's an error, I would like to show a red message. So I would just mention red. And if I try to sign in again, I can actually see something that looks much more reasonable. So this is how you can pass data between the web pages and the server. So far, we have seen how to send data from the form to the server, but now using the message, you can actually send data from the server to the HTML also. Any question?
Sir, how can we get particular message?
We don't really need to, because the client side is basically the dumb version. So if you want to get a particular message, you actually do the logic taking here. And based on the logics here, you send only one message or two messages.
Yes, sir.
Right? You don't really want to do a lot of logic here, because it's already complicated. And this is a template, and you don't want to put a lot of logic here. If you want to do that, we're going to be seeing this in the Vue.js, that you will have to use some JS framework, but that's actually quite complicated. All right. So I think this looks much reasonable, but there's one other problem. That is that although we have a sign-in page, we can still access the home page without any problem. We can just go to the home page. And that's actually blasphemous, right? Although the profile is not updated. Oh, we didn't really sign out. Let me sign out and let me show you what I mean. Or actually, you can, let's write the code for sign out for now. So let's create another thing called sign out. So sign in, and we have sign out. And in the views, let's create a function very quick called sign out. It's going to get the request, and it's actually quite easy. All you have to do is call the logout function that we had imported here. And in the logout, all you do is just pass down the request, and it will just erase the user data. And after this, you would want to return to the sign-in page. So you would want to redirect into the sign-in page. And let's just link this to the home page. So in the base template, we have the profile, and then we have the sign out. So let's add the URL tag. And the URL tag to that is going to be sign out. It's going to sign out the thing, and it will take us to the sign-in page again. To the sign-in page, yeah. So let's see if that works. So now we have the profile. Now if I go to the sign out, it now takes me to the sign-in page again. But if I go back, it says that you are not logged in. Can you see?
Yes, sir.
We have put a barrier here, but we still don't have any barrier in the home page. We can easily access the home page. So how can we solve this problem?
So we can check if a user is logged in or not.
How do we check?
So using that some kind of session thing.
This one?
Yes, sir.
Yes. This is what we can do exactly. So in the views of the home page, so before rendering this thing, we can check whether the user is authenticated or not. And once the user is authenticated, we render the page. This is the idea, right?
Yes, sir.
Now, is this common or uncommon? That only after login we would want to show some pages. Is it common or uncommon?
Common, sir.
This is very common, right? So we don't really want to put a lot of for every single view. We don't really want to put the similar type of logic. So Django has a very easy way of doing this. That for every view that we want to check whether the user is signed in or not, we have something called the decorator. So we can import from Django contrib auth, which is the authentication battery, and from this we imported the model in the last class. Now we are importing the decorators. If you don't know what a decorator is, don't worry about it. It's basically a function modifier. So from these decorators, we want to import something called the login required. So the way you use decorator is basically you pass it on top of the function. You type something like this, @ and then login required, and that's it. So now this function is modified, so it will automatically check whether there is a valid user or not.
I think
And
you spelled it wrong. The word decorators, you spelled it wrong.
oh, I'm sorry. Decor. It's very hard to talk and type. Decorator. Is it correct now?
Yes, sir.
I think so. All right. So so the way decorator works is basically this is a function modifier, and what it does is that this particular decorator checks whether there is a valid user or not. So basically, it actually calls this attribute. It checks whether this is true or not. If this is not true, it will try to send you to the login page. Now, we are not really logged in right now, and if I try to refresh this now, it will not really show me the home page, but it will give me an error. It will say that the page is not found because it is trying to send me to a URL location that was supposed to be the Django's URL location or the Django's login page, but since we did not really have this here, it will not really show me. So we have to mention that what is our login page location. What is our login page location?
So sign in.
Sign in. So we have to mention this in the settings.py. Then the settings.py, we have a static URL, I think. So we have a static URL. Let's just copy this. And similarly, we shall have to have a login URL. And the login URL is going to be sign in. So I think we will have to turn off the server again. Let me try to refresh this again. Or let me try to go to the home page again. Now it actually works. So if I want to go to the home page without signing in, it actually takes me to the home page or the sign in page. If I try this one more time, it actually does the same thing. But if I go to the profile page, it does not prevent me. Why?
We didn't use the function decorator.
Yeah, we did not really use the function decorator there. So that's why it is not going to prevent us from doing that. But we have used the custom code for that one, so it's not really going to matter.
Sorry.
Yes?
Can we send a message with the function decorator that this
Can
is
we?
why you're not? Can we send a message or a pop-up with the function decorator?
As far as I know, you cannot. As far as I know, because if you want to check something, for example, you want to check what user is this. For example, you are going to the profile, or you want to edit someone else's post. So in that URL, we have to check if the user ID matches with the post's user ID. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Yes, sir.
So in that case, you cannot do this using the normal function decorator. So in that case, you will have to use something called the class-based view, as far as I understand, as far as I know. So we have been using views by writing functions, and I think this is perfect for the first timers. But if you want to get more advanced, you can use something called the class-based view. So you can write classes, and you can generate the views from there. And when you're writing classes, you can write custom functions that actually allows you to render certain things. So in that case, you would not use a decorator. In that case, you would use a mixin. So when you're using a mixin, you have much more options. For example, you can check what kind of user this is, or when you're sending some them to some other pages, you can also send the messages. But as far as I know, for the functional decoder, you cannot really pass any message, right?
Yes, sir.
If I'm not mistaken. I will actually have to check. So this is it for the home page. I think let's try to sign in properly, and let's try to give a wrong password, and this will give us the invalid username and the password. And then we are going to finally log in, and then we can see the home page. Can you see that we can see the home page? So this looks pretty decent, and this looks like a Facebook page already. But in the next class, we are going to create a form here that will allow us to create new post. And here we are going to be creating the edit and the delete button for the users. And we're going to check whether this is our post or not. Because if this is not our post, we should not really have the option to edit and delete the things. So the CRUD operations are things that we're going to be doing in the next class after the city. Or the next class is basically tomorrow. So we are not going to have a city tomorrow. We're going to have the city on the next Sunday, which is the last class, I guess. So and the syllabus is going to be the model and the things that we have talked about in today's class. Okay.
So the question pattern will be like this today's class, sir. Yes, sir. What is the question pattern, sir?
The question pattern is going to be very easy. So I would give you a ER diagram, and you would have to implement the models based on that ER diagram. So I would give you different, for example, primary key and the different types of foreign key and stuff. You will have to write the code to implement those ER diagrams. And from today's class, I might give you some short questions. You will have to answer those things. Okay.
So it will be like theoretical. For today's class, it is like theoretical question, sir.
I did not get the question. What did you say?
So from the today's class, the question will be theoretical, sir.
Yeah, it's going to be theoretical. So basically, it's going to be conceptual. I might ask you how to do certain things and so. Yeah, it's obviously all the exams are written because you have to submit the PDF. You can just type the other stuff, the short question. Yes, Siddharth?
স্যার CT4 এর একটা সলিউশন দেওয়া যাবে?
Sure. Let me discuss this in the next class, inshallah.
Okay, sir.
All right. Okay, so I think that's it for today's class. Let me conclude the class here, and inshallah in the next class we are going to be implementing the CRUD operations, and then I would try to give you an idea of the Vue.js for the first time, inshallah. Yes, Tanjit?